Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Driti Atri, and you are watching Skyline. Tonight, West Asia is once again standing at the edge of dangerous chapter. The war may have started months ago, but today, the language is becoming even more explosive. Threats, missiles, military strike, diplomatic warnings, and a battle over one of the world's most important sea route. Every new headline raises just one question: where is this conflict heading next? And yes, if it keeps on growing, will the rest of the world be pulled into it? Tonight, we break down every major development in very simple language because behind every diplomatic headline, there is always a bigger story. So let's start with it. Well, imagine this. A funeral has just ended. The country is mourning. People are emotional. The world is watching every single move. And then a message appears, not a message asking for peace, but a message calling for talks, but a message promising revenge. Well, that's exactly what happened after the funeral of Iran's ex-Supreme Leader. For the very first time since the funeral, Mojtaba Khamenei, he spoke publicly. His message was short, but it immediately grabbed global attention. He said revenge was going to follow his father's death. His words quickly spread across TV channels, newspapers, social media. People immediately started asking, who exactly is Iran talking about? Who could be the target? Would Iran actually act on these warnings, or is this just psychological warfare? And then another development added fuel to the fire. A newspaper published photographs of several foreign leaders alongside Mojtaba Khamenei's statement. The publication included names such as the US President Donald Trump, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in fact British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and several other Western leaders. Within minutes, the images spread like a wildfire. Supporters shared them, critics condemned them. Security experts began discussing what is this messaging all about. But here's something very, very important. Although Mojtaba Khamenei, he referred to a list of people, he did not publicly identify any name. And there was no indication that the newspaper's published list had official government approval. And that distinction, that matters because during conflicts, rumors, official statements, media reports, and political messaging often get mixed. Well, when emotions run high, even one newspaper graphic, it can become a global news. Now think about it. If world leaders start appearing in revenge-themed graphics, what message does that really send? Is it meant to intimidate? Is it meant to design to influence public opinion, or is it simply a display of political anger? Well, only time will answer those questions, but one thing is definitely clear. The language between Iran and the West, that's becoming harsher. Diplomacy is becoming more difficult. Every statement now carries a lot of weight because sometimes wars do not expand only through missiles. Sometimes they expand through words. And yes, if the war of words was already alarming, what happened next, it showed that military confrontation was still very much alive. Because while leaders exchanged warnings, the battlefield expanded once again. Let me ask you something. If one narrow stretch of water suddenly becomes unsafe, could it affect the price of petrol in your city? Could it affect inflation? Could it disrupt global trade? The answer is yes. And that place is called Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway is one of the world's most important shipping routes. Well, before the war, roughly 1/5 of globally traded oil and natural gas passes through it. That is why every military incident here, it becomes international news. Well, according to the reports shared today, the United States carried out another round of military strike against the Iranian targets after an Iranian attack on a commercial vessel in the Strait of Hormuz. The US military said that it targeted missile sites, drone launch locations, ammunition depots, and communication facility. Washington said the objective was simple here. It was to reduce Iran's ability to threaten commercial shipping passing through the Strait of Hormuz. But Iran did not stay silent either. Reports say Tehran responded with attacks aimed at several Gulf countries that host the US military forces, including Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, and Oman. Well, missile alerts were reported in multiple Gulf states. while local authorities described interceptions and damage in some areas. But can you think about how serious that is? This is no longer just a confrontation between two nations. While the effects they are being felt across the Gulf, several nations are now facing security concern at the same time. Commercial shipping is under pressure, regional air defense systems are being activated, and the entire world is watching this narrow stretch of water. Why? Because if shipping slows down, oil supply could be affected. Well, if oil prices rise, transport becomes expensive, factories pay more, airlines pay more. In fact, food prices could increase. Inflation can return. So even if you are thousands of kilometers away from the Gulf, events there can still affect your daily life. And wait, that is why governments across the world are closely monitoring every single development in the Strait of Hormuz. Today, markets may appear calm. Tomorrow, one new military escalation could change everything. Well, that is the reality of modern geopolitics. A missile launch in one region, it can affect families living on the other side of the world. Now, let's move on to the next big development. The conflict is no longer limited to political statements or warnings. It is now becoming a battle of military claims and counterclaims. Well, every few hours, both the sides are announcing new operations, new strikes, and new victories. But in a war, one important rule always applies. Not every claim, it can be verified. And that brings us to Iran's latest announcement. Well, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or also we can call them IRGC, claimed that it had carried out missile and drone strike against the US military facilities in Bahrain. According to the IRGC, the attacks caused major damage to American military infrastructure. Well, Iran also claimed destroyed two strategic radar systems inside Oman, a long-range FPS radar and a surface detection radar. Now, why are these radar systems so important? Think of them as eyes of countries' air defense. They help detect incoming missiles, drones, aircraft from hundreds of kilometers away. So if such systems are damaged or even destroyed, it can make it much harder for the military to track threats in the sky. Iran also issued another warning though. It said that the US military support network across the Gulf remains within its reach. And at the very same time, Tehran repeated that the Strait of Hormuz, it could remain closed until and unless American military operations come to an end. If that statement becomes reality, then the consequences could extend far beyond West Asia. The Strait of Hormuz, that is one of the world's busiest energy routes. So any prolonged disruption there, it can affect global shipping, energy markets and fuel prices. But here's the most important point. These claims have not been independently verified, and at this stage, there is no independent confirmation that the radar system were actually destroyed or that the reported damage occurred exactly as claimed. And that is something that we must always remember while covering any conflict. During wars, information itself becomes a weapon. Every country wants to show strength, every side wants to shape public opinion. And that is why it's very important to separate confirmed facts from claims that are still awaiting verification. But still, whether these claims are confirmed or not, one thing is far beyond any doubt. The military tension is rising rapidly. Every new announcement, it increases uncertainty. Every new claim raises the risk of further escalation. And yes, while Iran was making these claims about Bahrain and Oman, another Gulf nation suddenly found itself in the headlines. This time, the focus shifted to Kuwait. Well, as the conflict continues to spread across the Gulf, Kuwait has become the latest country caught in the middle of this confrontation. Iranian state-linked media confirmed that fresh drone strikes targeted the US military facilities inside Kuwait. According to Iran's Tasman news agency, American missile system, military bunker and support facilities were among the targets during what Tehran described as another phase of its retaliatory campaign. The IRGC also vowed that the attacks on US military bases across the region, it would continue. And at the very same time, the United States announced another wave of military operations against Iranian target. The US Central Command, also known as CENTCOM, they said that its latest precision strike, they were aimed at reducing Iran's ability to threaten international shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. Well, this shows how quickly the whole situation is changing, though. One side launches an operation, the other side it responds, and then another response. The cycle continues, making it increasingly difficult for diplomacy to regain momentum. Well, for countries like Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and Oman, this is an extremely sensitive situation. Many of them host American military facilities while also maintaining very important relationship with countries across the region. And as tension rise, they are facing growing security challenges that they did not create, but they are forced to manage now. So this is also why important. This is also why government around the globe are watching every development so closely. The concern is no longer limited to the fighting itself. The fear is that any miscalculation could pull even more and more countries into the conflict. At this stage, many reports coming from the battlefield, they are difficult to verify, and that is why it is very important to distinguish between official announcement, media reports, and independently confirmed facts before drawing to any conclusion. But yes, if these reports from Kuwait, they were already raising the alarm bells, the next story is even more serious here. Reports began circulating about possible American casualties following fresh Iranian strikes. Well, the war is now entering an even more dangerous phase. Until now, we have been talking about military bases, missile system, radar installation, and strategic targets. But when reports begin talking about soldiers losing their lives, the whole situation it becomes even more serious. According to Iranian state media, Iran launched another wave of ballistic missile strike targeting US military facilities in Kuwait and Jordan. Iranian reports claim that American missile system, ammunition storage site, and fuel depots they were among the target. Soon after these reports appeared, another claim started spreading rapidly across social media. Some reports claim that 3 US troops had been killed during the strikes. And if that is true, this would mark a major escalation. But this is where we need to pause and separate claims from facts here. Kuwait has confirmed that there was material damage following the missile barrage. However, it has not officially confirmed reports of US casualties or the destruction of American military equipment. Jordan also said that its air defense systems intercepted multiple Iranian missiles and did not confirm any successful strike on their prince. So while headlines are circulating online, there is no independent confirmation that American soldiers were killed in these reported attacks. And that is why information during war, it must be handled very carefully. In today's world, videos travel faster than facts. A single social media post, it can reach millions of people within minutes. Old videos are reshared, images are taken out of context, claims spread across platforms before government even release official statement. And that is why every report must be viewed very carefully until more evidence becomes available. But still, one fact is undeniable here. The conflict is expanding. Missiles are being fired across multiple countries. Air defense systems are being activated. In fact, military bases remain on high alert, and ordinary people living across the Gulf, they are once again finding themselves caught in the middle of the conflict that they did not even choose. Well, for families living in the region, every siren, it brings uncertainty. For governments, every missile, that raises the risk of another round of retaliation, and for the rest of the world, every escalation increases concern about where this conflict could be next. But yes, while the battlefield was heating up, another unexpected development grabbed global attention. It wasn't a missile, it wasn't a drone, it was an aircraft that landed quietly in Tehran. Yet, its arrival, it sparked question around the globe. Sometimes a military aircraft, it can create as many headlines as a missile strike. And that is exactly what happened when one of Russia's most secure government aircraft landed in Tehran. Well, the aircraft is known as Tu-214PU, often described as Russia's flying command post because of its role during national emergency. It is frequently compared with America's so-called doomsday plane. Now, what makes this aircraft so special? Let's talk about that. Unlike the ordinary government planes, this particular aircraft, it is designed to help Russia's top leadership maintain communication during wartime or any national crisis. It is equipped with secure satellite communication system, advanced command and control technology and protection designed to keep the communication functioning even during extreme situation. Its arrival in Tehran, it immediately attracted global attention. Why? Because it came at a time when American airstrikes on Iran were continuing and military tension across the Gulf, they were already extremely high. Now, naturally, questions began to emerge. Was this simply a diplomatic visit? Was Russia sending senior officials for high-level discussion, or was Moscow trying to send a strategic message to Washington here? Well, the aircraft had visited Tehran before during talks related to Russia-Iran strategic partnership, though, but its return during an active military conflict, it has sparked fresh speculation. At this point, there is no official confirmation that the visit signals any direct Russian military involvement in the conflict. But in international politics, timing often matters just as much as words. Sometimes countries send messages not through speeches, but through military deployment, high-profile visit, or the arrival of symbolic aircraft. Whether this flight was routine diplomacy or a carefully calculated signal, that remains unclear, but one thing is certain. Its landing has added another layer of uncertainty to an already volatile situation. The world is now watching not only Iran and the US, but also how major powers like Russia respond to a conflict that continues to evolve. And yes, just when it seemed the conflict could not become any more dangerous, another wave of reports emerged from the Gulf. And this time the focus is once again on Kuwait. Ladies and gentlemen, according to reports carried out by Iranian media, while Tehran claimed that its ballistic missile struck a US Army ground forces unit in Kuwait after American strike targeted Iran's Qasem Island near the Strait of Hormuz. The reports also claim that Kuwait border posts and an offshore oil platform were hit during the latest escalation. In fact, another claim quickly grabbed international attention. Some reports allege that 3 American military personnel have been killed during the attack. And yes, if that is confirmed, then such an incident, it could represent a significant escalation in the conflict. However, it's very important to remember that these reports remain unconfirmed. And at the very same time, there is no independent verification that is confirming that the reported troop casualty is there. Now, this is becoming a very familiar pattern in this conflict. Every military operation is followed by competing narrative. One side announces the success, the other one responds with its own version of events. In the meantime, independent confirmation often takes much longer to emerge. And that is why governments, intelligence agencies, and defense analysts, they are carefully examining every new development before reaching any sort of conclusion. But even without any confirmation of individual claim, one reality is becoming increasingly clear. The conflict is no longer limited to one battlefield. Multiple Gulf countries are now dealing with missile alert. Military installations remain on high alert. Commercial shipping continues to face uncertainty. Regional governments are strengthening their security measures, and millions of people across the region, they are watching each new development with growing concern. The fear is not only about today's attacks. The bigger concern is what might happen tomorrow. Because once a conflict begins spreading across several countries, bringing it back under normal, that becomes much more difficult. And yes, while these reports were still making headlines, Iran made another major claim, this time involving one of America's most advanced rocket systems. The final story tonight takes us back to Kuwait, where another claim from Iran, it has once again intensified the whole information battle surrounding this whole conflict. According to Iran's IRGC, a precision drone strike successfully destroyed America's famous HIMARS launch platform stationed in Kuwait. Now, HIMARS, that is one of US military's most advanced mobile rocket system, and it has played a major role in several recent conflicts around the globe. Iran described the strike as part of its ongoing retaliatory campaign against American military assets in the Gulf. And at the very same time, Kuwait acknowledged that there had been damage to several border posts and oil-related facilities. However, official confirmation that destroyed HIMARS system were destroyed, that remains unavailable, and the reported destruction continues to be disputed. And this brings us to one of the biggest challenges of modern warfare. Well, today's wars are fought in two different arenas. Well, one on battlefield, the other one in an information battlefield. Military operations happen on the ground, but at the very same time, another battle unfolds online. Governments release statement. In fact, military spokesperson announce victories. Videos appear on social media, supporters amplify one version, opponents challenge another. For journalists and for the viewers, the responsibility is to separate the verified facts from the claims that are still being investigated, because accurate information becomes just as important as military strength. And as the US and Iran continue exchanging military action and political warning, the entire region remains on the edge. Diplomatic efforts are becoming increasingly difficult. The risk of further escalation remains high, and the world is definitely watching every headline, every statement, and every military moment with growing concern. Now, whether the coming days will bring negotiations or another round of conflict, that remains uncertain. But one thing is definitely beyond any sort of doubt. The development in West Asia, they are no longer affecting only one region. They have implications for global security, global trade, energy market, and millions of ordinary people around the globe. And that is why this story matters to all of us. Well, I'm Driti Atri. This is Skyline. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next episode.